Greetings from Costa Rica. I hope you're doing well this Saturday, June 3rd. Thank you very much for joining me for this delayed June 2023 real estate market report. My name is Matt Rosenstiel, aka Costa Rica Matt, and usually every Friday at noon, I'm online with my real estate forum open to questions from viewers like you and presenting information about one topic or another about Costa Rica real estate. And yesterday, I simply did not feel well enough to make the broadcast. It was actually a last-minute change. Today, you will hear the pathetic story behind why I could not broadcast yesterday. And believe me, it's definitely on the pathetic end of the spectrum. But our main focus is going to be talking about where the Guanacaste, Costa Rica real estate market stands as of June 3rd, 2023. We'll talk about general market conditions here. We'll go over some important information that I hammer on about the differences between our market in Guanacaste and the US real estate market. We're also going to go over new listings. We'll touch on price reductions that we're seeing across the market as a way to just provide you with updates as to what might be interesting properties to acquire or to keep an eye on. But more than anything, as always, I'm presenting information with the hope of empowering people to make good decisions when they're considering investing in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. Of course, I'm never giving legal advice, and you should be confirming everything with the lawyers here. But if you like straightforward information about Guanacaste and Costa Rica in itself, do be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification button so that you see my new videos. Before we get to our June 23 real estate market report, I did want to apologize profusely. Yesterday, I decided to do something absolutely foolish with my time and actually put myself at great risk instead of focusing on the absolute sacred commitment that I have to my audience, my millions and millions of viewers out there, to be there every Friday with at noon with Costa Rica real estate information. I'm very sorry about the decisions I have made. You may find out more details, but I wanted everyone to know directly from the source exactly what happened. I took my life into my own hands yesterday and decided to exercise. And not only that, but to undergo a very high impact exercise routine with our tennis instructor. We signed up with Leonard, a local guy who is from Germany originally, who is offering tennis lessons because our son had taken an interest in the sport. And I have still not yet learned the very quick physical limits that I have, especially when you're working out with somebody like Leonard. At one point, he was near the top 100 youth German tennis players, and he can definitely provide a workout. Yesterday, I got a window to take a quick lesson with him. I took advantage of it, and like so many victims of exercise and the whole health paradigm, I found myself brutally damaged after about 35 minutes. And by the time it was near broadcast hour, I could barely hold my breath and really just needed to lay down. So that's the pathetic story as to why we're here on Saturday, June 3rd, instead of Friday, June 2nd. Thanks very much to those who have tuned in. As always, we want to hear your questions, comments, concerns. This week, we do have a Rager of the Week. We'll end with that. Before we get started, though, enjoy this quick word from myself. Welcome to my June 2023 real estate market report for Guanacaste, Costa Rica. One of the first questions I want to discuss here is what kinds of data sources you can analyze to really try and keep an eye on a real estate market in a country with no complete MLS. By the way, yes, we're developing one, but it's still a fledgling enterprise. And some of the sources of data that we're going to look at in this broadcast are an interesting way of taking a different perspective on trying to judge historic interest in Costa Rica, specifically real estate, and to try and draw some conclusions about where things stand compared to years prior. I do want to touch on the specific conditions as of June 2023, obviously, but my last market report was a couple months ago in April. And the first point I'd love to get into as to the current conditions is that they're largely what I would expect, or that one would expect having watched my April report. In Costa Rica and Guanacaste, every year, May is absolutely a down month for tourism. You've got so many people who want to come down here in June, July, and August because the vast majority of our tourism is from the United States and Canada, that May is a dead month, both really for real estate and tourism. June and July represents a last sort of opportunity in the year for rental managers to really book their units well if they're doing short terms, and it's a bump in the annual tourism cycle. So as we're moving into June here, yes, we did have a very quiet month in the Costa Rica real estate market in May. You saw a lot of people closing deals that had gone under contract in the first quarter. The first quarter itself was your typical high season, although not nearly at the same fever pitch as you would see in 2022 or 21. We had lots of people visiting the country January, February, and March, and you did see a lot of stuff going under contract as you typically would. We don't have a very strong real estate cycle here that throughout the year, but it does see a high correlation with the travel cycle in terms of putting deals under contract because people are coming down for the country for their vacation. Maybe it's their fourth or fifth vacation, and this is also finally their buying trip. And they're going to be putting their property under contract sometime between December and April if they're a high season tourist. They're going to be closing then sometime between March, May, July. And then we'll also have a wave of stuff going under contract here over the next couple months. I did want to touch on, always remember that there is an incredibly fundamental difference between our real estate market here and the US and Canadian real estate market, in that the price of debt is not the single greatest lever in Costa Rica real estate. Rather, it's not the single greatest mover and shaker of properties and whether or not they're going to sell in our area. Yes, it is extremely important. And now that people are looking at higher interest rates in their home country, they are seeing definitely fewer sales here in Costa Rica. But what I mean to say is that there are other bigger factors in our real estate market that are acting as counterbalancing forces, even though interest rates just changed so dramatically up north. One of those enormous factors that's pushing people, and one of the things that I have heard out of the mouth of every single client in April and May, is a motivation to get out of their home country, and almost exclusively they're talking about the United States of America. Really, that stress seems to be returning to people's mentality. It's not as strong as I saw it in the immediate aftermath of the COVID-19 shutdowns. But like I said, it's exaggerating to say every single client, but among their top 5 reasons for moving to Costa Rica, everyone that I've given a tour to over the month of May has definitely included wanting to get out of the United States because they are worried about the political situation. And believe me, it's always fun to drive around and try and negotiate, okay, which side of the political situation is this person worried about? And how do I keep my mouth shut so that I don't offend them prior to figuring out which side they're on? Because you're seeing people come down to Costa Rica from both sides, no matter what. And I try to be a person who really focuses on some bigger, broader themes on the person rather than their politics. And luckily in Costa Rica, another common thread would be that the people coming down do not want to discuss it. They're not here to have passionate political debate. I'm not here for that either. And it's usually easy to reach a non-speaking agreement and to also just keep politics from ruining decent conversations with people down here. If you're one of those people looking to get out of the US, I still always want to reflect on the fact that you also need very good reasons that you love Costa Rica. You have to find a community here that works for you. And even if you hate your hometown and it's totally changing and you really feel like you can't live there anymore, don't think of Costa Rica necessarily as that magic pill. Do be sure to still do your due diligence on Costa Rica. So as we move into June, yes, I'm seeing a good projection for the next 2 months that our real estate market will continue to generate about 70 to 80% of what I would usually expect. It's slowing down from that fever pitch that we saw from 2021 to 2022. And we want to take a look at some other data here to also discuss what's happening in the country. First of all, I mentioned that at the Liberia International Airport, or rather in the first quarter of 2023, we had incredible data for international arrivals, specifically at Liberia. Let's go back a little bit. In 2019, you had an absolute peak in the Costa Rica international tourism achievement with 3.1 million visitors that year arriving internationally. That was by land and sea and the airports. So yeah, that does include a huge number of Nicaraguan people who are coming between borders and some Panamanians as well. However, just 3.1 million in 2019 was the largest number of international arrivals ever. In 2022, after the pandemic had just really wrecked our numbers for 2 years, we bounced back to 2.5 million, which was nearly the 3.1. And if you look at, a lot of the people who were still not able to come into Costa Rica in 2022, the overland arrivals have not recuperated, meaning, yeah, there's a lot less cross-border traffic between Costa Rica and Nicaragua, or at least the cross-border traffic that's being added into that figure for the total number of international arrivals. But if we want to take a look at a really nice graph put together by the Costa Rica Instituto de Turismo, and I need to find it. Pardon me for a second. I'll come over here to explain the graph momentarily. You actually have 4 different years of tourism arrivals compared and contrasted. And these are specifically, let me take a look here, for the 2 airports. The top one is San Jose, and the bottom one is Liberia. So the 4 years that are contrasted, blue is 29, the one that goes all the way down to 0 for many months is obviously 2020. The important line is this, let's see if I can get it here, green one, which is 2023. And you can actually see that for Liberia, which is, again, the bottom graph, 2023, the first 4 months, you had more international arrivals in the Liberia airport than you've had, or that you even had back in 2019, which is the purple line and the year that we had greatest tourism in Costa Rica so far. So 2023 started out gangbusters in terms of people coming in to Liberia. You definitely saw that when we landed a couple times, the airport was absolutely full. You have 5 jetways and planes parked out on the tarmac. There were also always a multitude of private planes. And you're also going to see going forward, I think they're adding another couple jetways or some $10 million expansion over the next 6 or 12 months. So the Liberia airport has continued to show increased traffic. April specifically wasn't as good as the first 3 months of the year in terms of being more than any other year, but it was definitely a positive sign that a lot of people are visiting in 2023, and that as a proxy for interest in Costa Rica, investment in real estate, and eventual sales is a pretty decent data point to start with. Another data point that we want to start talking about, interestingly, as a proxy for interest in Costa Rica real estate, you can also use Google search data for the related term Costa Rica real estate to see more or less where the market has been, where it's coming, and where it's coming from and where it's going. I had promised that I wanted to do a trivia question. We're going to look at a graph that shows Google's Costa Rica real estate traffic since since 2000. There is one single moment where the search traffic was absolutely highest. What year was the Google search traffic for the term Costa Rica real estate at its absolute peak from 2000 until now? Guess, and the answer might surprise you. We'll get to that as well as our Rager of the Week. But let's start talking a little bit about what we're looking at on Google. And when we started looking through Google Trends and using this to look at the Costa Rica real estate search data, some really interesting things emerged. One of them, first and foremost, if you look at the past 5 years of the search of traffic for Costa Rica real estate, there are definitely seasonal or moments during the year when you get people searching a lot less for that term online worldwide. And essentially it looks like whenever anybody has something better to do with their lives, you notice that a lot of these low points over the annual cycle are at vacation times, January, etc. The absolute peaks can definitely be seen happening after people make their New Year's resolutions in January. So just you can see people immediately trying to take an interest in Costa Rica real estate here. First of all, during times of crisis, here we are at July 2020, a few months into travel closures with the pandemic. Another peak up here, you're seeing a January New Year's resolution, everyone revenge traveling, after the pandemic. And then once again, you had another January 22 peak, New Year's resolution, I'm going to do it in 2023. Interestingly, January 2023, we saw significantly less traffic than the 2 years prior. And that's exactly what I would expect because, again, 21 and 22 were incredibly hot years for the Costa Rica real estate market, and things are certainly cooling down. Some other things that we saw that were pretty interesting, you could definitely see people, there's one slide in particular here, interest in Costa Rica real estate correlating directly to peaks or valleys in the US stock market. Obviously, when people's financial portfolios are doing really well, they get online and start dreaming of their vacation home. You could see, at a particularly bad moment in 22, both the stock market and interest in searching for real estate crashed, and vice versa, another, bumper moment. And January was also supported by a very high stock market. Here's some more the graphs, and I should have looked all the way through this because we had these ready to go. Sorry, Dimitri. These are those numbers that I was talking about for the international arrivals at the Guanacaste, Liberia airport, showing that, over 2023, we had more than ever, even 2019. Now, you do see, there's always going to be a seasonal plummet that happens here in April and May, and then this dip up, another little bump in tourism that happens in June and July. And this is the greatest illustration of our low season, for tourism. And frequently it can be when you see the fewest, properties going under contract. Another interesting thing was that we analyzed, the vast majority of volume of search traffic for Costa Rica or Costa Rica real estate rather, is actually happening within the country. You can see that when you compare the amount happening in the US and Canada to people who are Googling Costa Rica real estate, here in country, the results, or many more people are actually here and searching for it. Anyhow, just some fun stuff to play around with. Google also suggests, based on the fact that, this year at January, we were looking at about half of the search volume that we were in 22 and 21. It's consistent with our cooling trend in the market. And I don't see Costa Rica completely being immune from all of the hesitance that's going to enter into people's psychology. Earlier, I mentioned, the biggest lever in the Costa Rica real estate market. It's not the price of debt. Mortgages are unheard of for foreigners here. They're still barely being introduced. So emotions can be one of the biggest things that can really drive people's decision to buy or to wait here in Guanacaste. The emotion is no longer near that fever pitch it was in 2021 and 2 as well. Yes, people are starting to get a little worried. I'm hearing it almost every day. Yes, we are going to see a lot of people who are affluent, who have not been affected by the mortgage changes in the US, who are still going to buy real estate in Costa Rica over the coming quarter. But absolutely, I see things getting a little bit interesting. And especially, as we move towards 2024, you might see that emotion ratchet up and once again provide a huge impetus for a lot of people to look to Central America for their new place to live. I also wanted to mention, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want to talk about a listing or a price reduction, be sure to post it in the comments. Having touched probably way too much at length on the general market conditions, let's move on and let's talk a little bit more about some new listings and price reductions to put a few things on your radar. First, let's go with a few price reductions to put in front of you, because I really, I've tried to do this a couple times and have ended up not being able to. First and foremost, we have a motivated seller in Playa Grande. This is actually a listing that I'm working on with a brokerage in Grande as co-brokers. I love collaborating, and doing this listing with them means they can handle showings, they're helping people out, etc. But this is a 10-bedroom Playa Grande sort of rental income machine. A brand new construction. It was finished only last year. Really, it's 4 apartments that are set up ideally to be short or long-term rentals. And this is a situation where you're not necessarily seeing the market really beat a price down. The property's only been listed on the shorter end of the spectrum for $1 million properties. But really, it's a situation where the seller does not want to be in this particular spot anymore. It doesn't provide exactly what they wanted. They really don't feel at home living and managing this property, and they're just ready to move on. So we reduced this price. Originally, we were up above 1.1 million. Now it's $999,000. We do that so your search results across all websites, if you put in $1 million, you'll be able to get this property. These sellers are motivated. It's a good, easy passive income earner, because you could probably be looking at $11,000 or $12,000 in gross income monthly if you just long-term rented the apartments. Grande is super in demand. There are few rentals available, and because you're close to so many schools in Huacas, I could see for long-term renters keeping this place as just sort of a cash flow, really good investment. And again, it is new. It's concrete construction, which I personally love. And, you're talking motivated sellers. So come on out and see it if you're in Playa Grande. To move on to another price reduction, I definitely also wanted to mention, we had Casa Tim down in Venado. And these are listings that I'm one of the only few people who tries to tackle these projects. It's south of Junquillal, which puts you in one of the most quiet, really still undiscovered areas in Guanacaste. This is your authentic location where your nearest community is still Costa Rican. This is definitely not for people who want to drive to Walmart every day, but it's an absolutely enormous home. They have total, I think, what square footage are we looking at? 3,700 square feet in their 2 levels. The bottom is a 2-bedroom, massive, sort of single space. They've got it set up for rentals. You also have a caretaker apartment on one side, and then you have an ocean view from the 2nd level. You're really in a place that's absolutely quiet now. And you can walk down to this completely lost world, undiscovered little beach here at the river mouth in about 10, 15 minutes. This is the real incredible thing about the home. You can potentially live in one apartment and rent the other level out to someone, or have family in one side or the other. This is the upstairs, but then you're walking down to this beach that is just an absolutely special place that you don't find in many places in the world. There will not be a tourist there. There are no restaurants. That beach is going to have really just local families visiting it to fish, to look for crabs, on and on. Someday that might change. They might develop the property next door, and if they do, you're going to be looking at a home that is worth much more because of the investment in the area, and you could always sell out. So that's Casa Tim. If you're interested, do be sure to email me at matt@cbpacificrealty.com about that or any other listings. A couple other price reductions that caught my eye this month. One of the cool things that we found we can do is use archived versions of websites to see exactly what the historic price of a home was. Usually, because we don't have that really complete MLS, you're not going to be able to get the data as to what the price reduction was. And people don't say it's reduced from. They only say reduced to, because they don't want to show off how desperate the seller is. But there were some pretty significant price reductions in the market. One that caught my eye was a Catalina Cove home in Brasilito. That went all the way, and I got to actually pull open my calculator here to get the difference. You went from $995,000 on January 28th. You went to $749,000, or a price reduction of $246,000, or about 25%. Catalina Cove is a neighborhood in a high-trafficked area. Brasilito has definitely become really a nerve center. Yes, there was some very difficult news there about a year ago, I think. I don't think this property is related in any way, but the neighborhood did have some issues with crime. But to see a 25% price reduction on anything, you're starting to see some sellers who are getting that real sort of, the psychology creeping in that they need to really put some effort into it to be able to sell. You also saw a Naxos condo in Langosta. They went from $499 down to $465, or a $34,000 price reduction. That's more what I would expect to see at about 7%. For Naxos condos to be sitting on the market and to not be selling is another sign of the cooling market overall. Those are definitely very likable and saleable condos because they're so close to the beach and there aren't that many towers. We also had a few luxury reductions, homes going from 1.3 million down to 1.15. Another up in Flamingo, reduced from 2 million down to 1.85. That reduction brings up a very interesting case scenario, and I actually want to talk about that. That's a beachfront home in Playa Flamingo. Again, a reduction from 2 million to 1.85 million. That could sound very interesting, but if you actually look at very old archived listings, that same property was listed everywhere across the price spectrum at lower price points prior to 2019. And if you're currently watching the real estate market, you're going to see that even people's reduced prices now may still represent a luxury, bubbly, post-peak price that wasn't some number that they could get in 2017, 18, or 19. I actually know of another home that finally sold at 2.5 million. That would look at an absolute great price reduction. This was the asking price for a Mar Vista home that my colleague and awesome person Gina sold. They finally got to an asking price at 2.5, and it sold somewhere in there. But that price reduction of 2.9 to 2.5 happened 3 years after the person who bought the property spent a total of about $1.4 million on the original purchase. Yes, it was remodeled and had some new furniture, etc. But we're looking at from 2021 was the purchase year, the value being 1.4 all in cost. And actually, I take that back. That was very end of 2020. 1.4 million, a buyer who picked it up during the pandemic, resold it recently somewhere in the neighborhood above 2 million because of that greater demand. But they only sold it above 2 million after they had come down from the 3 million neighborhood. That's representative of where we stand. You had sellers asking about as much as humanly possible 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months ago. And now the properties that have not been picked up, they are starting to reduce their prices. This will not become overnight some market in which you can find fire sales and incredible deals. You do have to be cautiously optimistic that because everybody owns their properties in cash, and because debt is not the biggest and baddest thing in Costa Rica, they're not going to be motivated to sell overnight just because of that change in interest rates. Moving on here from price reductions, let's talk about some new listings that have come on the market, and for just a second, try and talk about how they fit into the context. Let me see here. I may have had, by the way, if you're interested in Casa Tim, that property that I showed just a little bit ago that was reduced to $489, you can hold your iPhone or whatever phone you have up to the computer screen with your camera function on. This will pull up the link in your camera and just click on it to see what you're looking at there. So anyhow, that was Casa Tim, the massive 2-level, almost 4,000 square foot ocean view home in a very, very quiet area. Let me get back here. Let's start talking about just a few new listings here. Before I go much further, I want to definitely pitch our first new listing, my agent Camille's new listing in Playa Grande. Now, this is a totally different animal. Where I was talking about a 10-bedroom 4-apartment long-term rental investment property earlier. This is a 10-bedroom retreat center. It is ready for some yoga instructor, some influencer, anybody with a niche health retreat business to pick up and turn into a really well-performing investment. This kind of center in Grande would be incredible because the Grande surf wave is one of the most sought after in Costa Rica. You really have that opportunity to put people in along one of the best surf breaks. The community also has restrictions on commercial construction down by the beach. And I wanted to mention that for both properties, you cannot build hotels down really close to the beach in Grande going forward. The hotels that are there are almost all of the inventory that there will ever be. So it's a community that's limited for sure in the number of commercial establishments it will ever have. And places like this glamping retreat center, where you're tucked away on a large sort of spacious property, they're going to be in high demand and valuable because you won't have that explosion of hostels down by the beach like you've seen in Tamarindo. And to quickly pull up the maps function here so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about, we will take a magic little tour up to Playa Grande, and you can see this whole area was designated the National Marine Park for the leatherback turtles. The nesting habitat here and down to Tamarindo is critical for leatherbacks. And so down on Grande, they will never, ever allow commercial construction on most of their beachfront. Don't quote me on the exact locations, but most of this is now preserved in perpetuity so that what is there is going to be what is in Playa Grande for the long term. It's something that makes Playa Grande absolutely unique for sure. You know, you're not going to have, like I said, a million surf hostels moving in like you did in Tamarindo. And it's just going to keep the community oriented towards a more residential flavor over the long term. If you want to know more about that glamping center, I actually have Camille's contact. She speaks English, French, and Spanish. She's the exclusive listing agent for that 10-bedroom retreat center for sale in Playa Grande. That's the kind of thing that honestly, also it's a scarce resource now because the last 2 years of our overheated real estate market have seen people buying up these kinds of opportunities in whatever was available. And replacement of these retreat centers through new construction is not going to keep up with the demand because construction just moves at such a glacial pace here in Costa Rica. And quite frankly, most of the people who have their niche tourism business, the money to invest in a property in Costa Rica, the money to move to Costa Rica in the first place, most of them are going to be able to just pick up a functioning center rather than having to buy and build something. And especially in these emotional times when people are moving down out of fear, etc., we're seeing that they will snatch up existing retreat centers. So if you want to get in touch with Camille, hold your phone up once again. The camera comes up, or you have to pull up your camera. The link will come up there, and just click on that to get her contact information. Whew! Let's go back quickly. I had asked earlier if someone would guess the year of peak Google search traffic for Costa Rica real estate, and it was actually 2004. I can easily imagine how that year in particular blew things out of the water just because the international arrivals of tourists began. And in that year, you could still buy absolutely ridiculously dirt cheap Costa Rica real estate. So I imagine that the number of people who were investing in it, they were also brute Google searching Costa Rica real estate because 19 years ago, they also wouldn't have had quite so many platforms where you then search for properties. people would have just been going to Google and literally looking for any brokers they could find, trying to get Costa Rica real estate. So I was interested to see that, yeah, 2004 was Google's peak for that traffic, and it has never gotten to that same level again, which is sad because I've designed my entire YouTube channel based on the premise of generating business through the popularity of the Google search term Costa Rica real estate. Before I get to my Rager of the Week to wrap up here, I did want to mention, if you're watching my channel and interested in moving to Guanacaste, feel free to reach out by email to matt@cbpacificrealty.com. Be happy to help you, though as a realtor, I'm looking to help people who have decided that this is the place they want to invest and are ready to start looking at real estate options. Unfortunately, I am not available to answer questions about the weather. Those are on my channel and in endless real estate chats like this one. I'll take a quick look here back at our comments and questions. A few months ago, we bought land in Samara and are trying to build a home. Costs, if so, when can we speculate construction costs to come down? Extremely good question that I am unfortunately unable to answer. I am not a builder, and I don't understand the delays that happen behind construction cost supply chain problems. Currently, I've heard people say that $150 per square foot for really high quality concrete homes in the modest 15 to 2,500 square foot range is a number for like Doug Stern, the builder who I trust a ton, who's not the cheapest builder whatsoever, but somebody who will give you a very nice home, hardwood furniture, built-ins rather, the ceilings, the rafters, everything would feel really high quality. You could probably get lower than 150. You can certainly get higher than 150 per square foot. I think to go lower, you just really need to find builders that are going to be more on the industrial scale in our area. If you're willing to work with a prefab steel frame system or prefab concrete system, those can be ways to really do cheap construction. Below that $150 per square foot number. But for my money, if you want a home that will last decades and decades and decades, then doing something in the 150 square foot range is definitely a good idea. Definitely, Eric, there have been a lot of high bids. Some builders over the past 2 years wouldn't really give fixed quotes, and they would even have cost plus materials bids as a policy because materials were so unpredictable. Doug, for a time, was saying, I can't really just put a number on what you expect me to do a full job for, because it's going to take me 6 months. We're going to plan for 3 months. By the time I'm buying all of this stuff for you, really, I can't give the costs. I do think things are stable enough that they can now give real bids. But again, I can't, unfortunately, even speculate as to when materials will be cheaper. Definitely, Paul. Anyway, I wanted to, before we head out here, bring in my favorite segment, the Rager of the Week. This was in response to an Instagram reel that we had. And this week's Rager of the Week was a helpful comment from Sergio Turi. Stop building ugly condos. Destroying nature was his comment. I could tell he was frustrated because he didn't have time to hit the right keys. I could feel the anger because he also didn't have time to research the property more and realize that this particular property was a home. And anyhow, Sergio, thanks very much for your helpful input, and congratulations on winning our Rager of the Week. I'll be back live next Friday, June 9th. Thanks very much for tuning in today, folks. It's been a pleasure as always.